In the previous video, we analyzed some reasons for examination failure. One of such reasons was students' inability to understand the meaning of the command or action words in examination questions. In this second video, we will look deeper into the command words with a view to helping our subscribers in their future examinations. So, listen. Learn. Be empowered. What are command or action words? Command or actions words are instructions for how to answer examination question. Put differently, they are the words and phrases used in examinations and other assessment tasks to tell students how they should answer the questions. So, it is important you know the meanings of these words and what you should do when you come across them in your examinations. Where possible, we will draft sample questions to illustrate how they are used in questions. Please note that this article is not exhaustive. The commonly used command or action words in examination questions include: analyze. It means to break down the content of a topic, or issue, into its constituent elements in order to provide an in-depth account and convey an understanding of it. With this action word, you can also be expected to break down the subject matter into its component parts and examine their relationships. Example question: analyze the data presented in the table below and suggest reasons for the differential satisfaction levels of the respondents on the sharing of the COVID-19 palliative materials in the state. Annotate. This requires you to add a number of words to a diagram or an image that describe and/or explain the features of the image or diagram. It is more involving than mere identifying the features, which is labeling. Apply. Apply, as an examination action word, requires the use of an abstraction to explain a concrete situation. Your answer to such question should sufficiently show how an abstract idea, concept, principle, model or method explains a concrete situation or solves a given problem. Assess. When this is used in a question, you are to consider several options or arguments and weigh them up so as to come to an objective conclusion about their effectiveness or validity. In other words, you are expected to present judgments of possible relevant factors and their importance or significance in the issue or situation at hand. Sometimes it comes as critically assess. The above requires you to carry out an examination of a given issue from the point of view of a critic. This means you tackle the issue at stake with a particular focus on the strengths and weaknesses of the points of view you are expressing. Example question: assess the possible economic benefits of the proposed new stadium in the state and advise the governor appropriately. Calculate. This is a call to carry out a mathematical process. Depending on the level of the examination, always remember the importance of showing your working in details except you are otherwise instructed. Example question: using the data in the table, calculate the total volume of petrol used if the lorry makes 5 trips to the same destination in a day. Comment. Comment, as an action word in a question, requires you to give a justified opinion or personal view on an issue. Here, you can criticize, discuss, evaluate, explain, or illustrate the meaning of something and its implications. Example question: comment on the long-established pattern of trade between the northern and southern parts of Nigeria. Compare and contrast. By the use of these two action words, you are to do two things here. To compare means to identify the similarities, while to contrast means to identify the differences between the subjects, persons, ideas, objects and so on. In comparing and contrasting, your answer must cross-reference between these two sides. You do not just write two completely separate descriptions, as doing this will be far from answering the question. Example question: compare and contrast weather and climate. Criticize. Here, the student is expected to point out a topic's mistakes or weaknesses as well as its favorable aspects. You are to analyze and not to explain the situation with a view to giving a balanced answer. There may be no correct side or stand to take while criticizing, but be careful as controversial issues may be raised. Define or what is. In answering a question with this action word, you are to give a generally acceptable meaning of a word or phrase. This is best done in a concise manner. The meaning can either be a dictionary definition or a technical one depending on the specific academic discipline. Remember to give a generally accepted definition if the concept in question, like democracy, has various definitions by different authors. Except you do not have options, always leave such questions as they usually attract poor and low marks. Example question: define the term education management. Demonstrate. To demonstrate is to prove by logical reasoning that something is what it is said or appears to be. It can also mean to prove, provide evidence, illustrate or describe by use of experiments, examples, etc. This question often require an in-depth understanding of a process, operational pattern, production procedure, lines of operation, etc. Example question, using the marker pen, demonstrate on the board with diagrams how energy from the sun gets into the human system. Describe. To describe means to give an account, in words, of a phenomenon which may be an entity, an event, a feature, a pattern, a distribution, a process, etc. In doing this, give as much information as possible that will be enough to inform the examiner that you actually know what you are describing. Your description should sufficiently paint a clear mental image of what was being described. Determine. Coming across determine as an action word in a question demands that you come to a decision or conclusion on the issue raised in the question by investigation. Example question, in the image below, determine that the hired assassin is the woman in purple dress. Discuss. Here, you are to critically analyze a given the subject matter by identifying and exploring various points of view and their respective positive, negative aspects concerning the given matter. Or you are to evaluate the positive and negative merits of a matter to provide an overall judgment on its validity, strength or worth. It also involves setting out both sides of an argument, for and against, and come to a conclusion related to the content and emphasis of the discussion. There should be some evidence of balance, though not necessarily of equal weighting. Example question, discuss the effects of President Trump's suspension of support to WHO on the after COVID-19 global health intervention. Evaluate. Here, you need to carefully examine and consider several options, ideas or arguments and come to a conclusion about their importance, success and worth. The aim is mainly for you to determine the value of something by identifying criteria for its measurement. You go on to appraise the degree to which the matter satisfies the stated criteria. You need to provide reasons to justify your appraisal, supporting same with evidence and illustrations. This is similar to discuss, but with more emphasis on a judgment in the conclusion. Example question, evaluate the sustained use fertilizer in cropping on a piece of land. Justify. Here, the student is expected to supply reasons for the validity of a view or idea why some action should be undertaken. In doing this, you need to discuss and discount alternative views or actions, clearly stating the strengths and weaknesses of the views involved. Remember that you are to prove that the chosen outcome have positives that outweigh the negatives. However, you may need to be very careful as it may involve a negative statement. Example question, justify this choice of euthanasia over patience till natural death occurs. Explain. You are to clearly state the causes of a phenomenon and or the factors which influence its form, nature in great detail. This usually requires an understanding of processes. Since this requires a higher level skill than description, it often has greater mark allotment. Always use the mark allocation of such questions as a guide for how much information to write in your answer. Illustrate. To illustrate means to explain clearly by giving concrete examples and using comparisons where necessary. Such examples as figures, sketches, diagrams and any other piece of useful and related information should constitute a greater content of the answer. Sometimes, illustrate, as an action word, may be added on to another in a question. List. It can be used interchangeably with state, mention or enumerate. It demands you to only provide an itemized series of the required parts, number of ideas, aspects, events, things, qualities, reasons, etc. as they apply to the issue in the question. While answering such questions, you do not need to discuss anything. Just make a list. Outline. This means to provide a brief account and description of relevant information. You just give the main points without wasting your time providing unnecessary details. Doing so earns you no additional marks. Prove. Disprove. Either of these action words needs you to provide adequate evidence for or against and demonstrate logical argument and reasoning on something. You will more often than not see them in questions concerning abstract or scientific subjects. Recommend. To recommend is to advise on the appropriate actions to pursue in terms the examiner or any such recipient of your answer will understand. State. State demands you to briefly give the relevant points on the object, issue or condition concerned. You do not need to make a lengthy discussion. You are safe to ignore minor details. Summarize. The meaning of summarize is to give a brief, condensed account of something or an event. Remember to avoid unnecessary details and to conclude your explanation. Trace. This means to give a brief of the logical or chronological stages of the development of a theory, process, a person's life and so on. This is often used in historical questions. If you master the action words above and know exactly what you expected to write as your answer, there is no examination you cannot pass. Your performance in subsequent examinations is now dependent on you. Understanding these action words gives you some advantage in any examination.